Book 10. Meanwhile, the heinous and despiteful act of Satan done in paradise, and how he and the serpent had perverted Eve, her husband, she, to taste the fatal fruit, was known in heaven. For what can escape the eye of God all-seeing, or deceive his heart omniscient, who in all things wise and just, hindered not Satan to attempt the mind of man, with strength entire, and free will armed, complete to have discovered and repulsed whatever wiles of foe or seeming friend. For still they knew, or ought to have still remembered the high injunction not to taste that fruit, whoever tempted, which they not obeying incurred, what could they less, the penalty, and manifold in sin deserved to fall. Up into heaven from paradise in haste the angelic guards ascended, mute and sad for man, for of his state by this they knew, much wondering how the subtle fiend had stolen entrance unseen. Soon as unwelcome news from earth arrived to heaven's gate, displeased all were who heard. Dim sadness did not spare that time celestial visages, yet mixed with pity, violated not their bliss. About the new arrived in multitudes the ethereal people ran, to hear and know how all befell. They toward this throne supreme accountable made haste, to make appear with righteous plea their utmost vigilance, and easily approved, when the Most High Eternal Father from his secret cloud, amidst in thunder, uttered thus his voice. Assembled angels, and ye powers returned from unsuccessful charge, be not dismayed, nor troubled at these tidings from the earth, which your sincerest care could not prevent, foretold so lately what would come to pass, when first this tempter crossed the gulf from hell. I told ye that he should prevail, and speed on his bad errand. Man should be seduced and flattered out of all, believing lies against his Maker. No decree of mine concurring to necessitate his fall, or touch with slightest moment of impulse his free will, to her own inclining left in even scale. But fallen he is, and now what rests, but that mortal sentence pass on his transgression. Death denounced that day, which he presumes already vain and void, because not yet inflicted as he feared by some immediate stroke, but soon shall find forbearance nor no acquittance ere day end. Justice shall not return, his bounty scorned. But whom shall I send to judge them? Whom but thee, vice-regent son, to whom I have transferred all judgment, whether in heaven or earth or hell? Easy it may be seen that I intend mercy colleague with justice, sending thee man's friend, his mediator, his designed both ransom and redeemer voluntary, and destined man himself to judge man fallen. So spake the Father, and unfolding bright toward the right hand his glory, and the sun blazed forth unclouded deity, he full resplendent all his Father manifest expressed, and thus divinely answered mild. Father eternal, thine is to decree, mine both in heaven and earth to do thy will supreme, that thou in me, thy Son beloved, may ever rest well pleased. I go to judge on earth these thy transgressors, but thou knowest, whoever judged, the worst on me must light when time must be, for so I undertook before thee, and not repenting this obtain of right, that I may mitigate their doom on me derived, that I may temper so justice with mercy, as may illustrate most them fully satisfied, and thee appease. Attendants none shall need, nor train, where none are to behold the judgment, but the judged those two. In third best absence is condemned, convict by flight, and rebel to all law. conviction to the serpent none belongs. Thus saying, from his radiant seat he rose from high collateral glory. Him thrones and powers, princedoms and dominations, ministrants accompanied to heaven gate, from whence Eden and all the coast in prospect lay. Down he descended straight. The speed of God's time counts not, though with swiftest minutes winged. Now was the sun in western cadence low from noon, and gentle airs due at their hour to fan the earth now waked and usher in the evening cool, when he from wrath more cool came the mild judge and intercessor both to sentence man. The voice of God they heard now walking in the garden, by soft winds brought to their ears while day declined they heard, and from his presence hid themselves among the thickest tree, both man and wife, till God approaching thus to Adam called aloud. Where art thou, Adam? Wont with joy to meet my coming seen far off? I miss thee here, not pleased, thus entertained with solitude, where obvious duty erewhile appeared unsought. Or come I less conspicuous, in what change absents thee, or what chance detains? Come forth. He came, and with him Eve more loth, though first to offend, discountenanced both and discomposed. Love was not in their looks, either to God or to each other, but apparent guilt and shame and perturbation and despair, anger and obstinacy and hate and guile. Whence Adam, faltering long, thus answered brief. I heard thee in the garden, and of thy voice afraid, being naked, hid myself. To whom the gracious judge without revow replied, My voice hast thou often heard, and hast not feared, but still rejoiced. How is it now become so dreadful to thee, that thou art naked? Who hath told thee? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I gave thee charge thou shouldst not eat? To whom thus Adam, sore beset, replied, O heaven, in evil strait this day I stand before my judge, either to undergo myself the fatal crime, or to accuse my other self, the partner of my life, whose failing, while her faith to me remains, I should conceal, not exposed to blame by my complaint. The strict necessity subdues me, and calamitous constraint, lest on my head both sin and punishment, however insupportable, be all devolved. Though should I hold my peace, yet thou shouldst easily detect what I conceal. The woman who thou madest to be my help, and gavest me as my perfect gift, so good, so fit, so acceptable, so divine, that from her hand I could suspect no ill. And what she did, whatever in itself her doing seemed to justify the deed, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. To whom the sovereign presence thus replied, Was she thy God, that her thou didst obey before his voice? Or was she made thy guide, superior but equal, that to her thou didst resign thy manhood? In the place wherein God set thee above her made of thee, and for thee, whose perfections far excelled her in all real dignity? Adored she was indeed, and lovely to attract thy love, but not thy subjection, and her gifts were such as under government well seemed, unseemly to bear rule, which was thy part in person, hadst thou known thyself aright. And so saying, he thus to Eve in few, Say, woman, what is this which thou hast done? To whom sad Eve with shame nigh overwhelmed, confessing soon, yet not before her judge bold or loquacious, thus abashed replied, The serpent me beguiled, and I did eat. Which then the Lord God heard, without delay to judgment he proceeded on the accused serpent, though brute, unable to transfer the guilt on him who made him instrument of mischief and polluted from the end of his creation. Justly then accursed as vitiated in nature, more to know concern not man, since he no further knew, nor altered his offense. Yet God at last to Satan first in sin his doom applied, though in mysterious terms judged as then best, and on the serpent thus his curse let fall. Because thou hast done this, thou art accursed above all cattle, each beast of the field. Upon thy belly groveling thou shalt go, and dust shall eat all the days of thy life. Between thee and the woman I will put enmity, and between thine and her seed. Her seed shall bruise thy head, thou bruise his heel. So spake this oracle, then verified when Jesus, son of Mary, second Eve, saw Satan fall like lightning down from heaven, prince of the air. Then rising from his grave, spoiled principalities and powers, triumphed in open show, and with ascension bright captivity led captive through the air, the realm itself of Satan long usurped, whom he tread at last under our feet, even he who now foretold his fatal bruise, and to the woman thus his sentence turned. Thy sorrow I will greatly multiply by thy conception. Children shalt thou bring in sorrow forth, and to thy husband's will then shalt submit. He over thee shall rule. On Adam the last thus judgment he pronounced, because thou hast hearkened to the voice of thy wife, and eaten of the tree concerning which I charged thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat thereof. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. Thou in sorrow shalt eat all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles it shall be made to bring forth unbid. And thou shalt eat the herb of the field, and in the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For thou out of the ground was taken. Know thy birth, for dust thou art, and shalt to dust return. So judged he man, both judge and Savior sent, in the instant stroke of death denounced that day removed far off. Then pitying how they stood before him naked to the air, that now must suffer change, disdain not to begin thenceforth the form of servant to assume, as when he washed his servants' feet. So now as father of his family he clad their nakedness with skins of beasts or slain, or as the snake with youthful coat repaid, and thought not much to clothe his enemies. But nor he their outward only with the skins of beasts, but inward nakedness, much more opprobrious, with his robe of righteousness, arraying covered them from his father's sight. To him with swift ascent he up returned, into his blissful bosom reassumed in glory as of old. To him appeased all, though all knowing what passed with man recounted, mixing intercession sweet. Meanwhile, ere thus was sinned and judged on earth, within the gates of hell sat sin and death, in counterview within the gates, that now stood open wide, belching outrageous flame far into chaos, since the fiend passed through, sin opening, who thus now to death began. O son, why sit here we each other viewing, in idly, while Satan, our great author, thrives in other worlds, and happier seat provides for us as offspring dear? It cannot be but that success attends him. If mishap ere this he had returned, with fury driven by his avengers, since no place like this can fit his punishment or their revenge. Methinks I feel new strength within me rise, wings growing, and dominion given me large beyond this deep. Whatever draws me on, or sympathy, or some connatural force powerful at great distance to unite with secret amity things of like kind by secret conveyance, thou, my shade inseparable, must with me along, for death from sin no power can separate. But lest this difficulty of passing back stay his return perhaps over this gulf impassable and impervious, let us try adventurous work, yet to thy power and mine not unagreeable, to find a path over this main from hell to that new world where Satan now prevails, a monument of merit high to all the infernal host, easing their passage hence, for intercourse or transmigration as their lot shall lead. Nor can I miss the way, so strongly drawn by this new-felt attraction and instinct, whom thus the meager shadow answered soon. Go whither fate and inclination strong leads thee, I shall not lag behind, nor err the way thou leading. Such a scent I draw of carnage, prey innumerable, and taste the savor of death from all things there that live. Nor shall I want to the work thou enterprisest be wanting, but afford thee equal aid. So saying, with delight he snuffed the smell of mortal change on earth, as when a flock of ravenous fowl, though many a league remote, against the day of battle, to a field where armies lie encamped, come flying, lured with scent of living carcasses designed for death the following day in bloody fight. So scented the grim feature, and upturned his nostril wide into the murky air, sagacious of his quarry from so far. Then both from out hell gates into the waste wide anarchy of chaos, damp and dark, flew diverse, and with power, their power was great, hovering over the waters, what they met, solid or slimy as a raging sea tossed up or down, together crowded, drove from each side, shoaling toward the mouth of hell, as when two polar winds blowing adverse upon the Cronian sea together drive mountains of ice that stop the imagined way beyond Petsora eastward to the rich Cathayan coast. The aggregated soil, death with his mace petrific, cold and dry, as with a trident smote, and fixed as firm as Delos floating once. The rest his look bound with Gorgonian rigor not to move, and with asphaltic slime. Broad as the gate, deep to the roots of hell, the gathered beach they fastened, and the mole immense wrought on over the foaming deep high-arched, a bridge of length prodigious, joining to the wall immovable of this now fenceless world forfeit to death. From thence a passage broad, smooth, easy, inoffensive, down to hell. So, if great things to small may be compared, Xerxes, the liberty of Greece to yoke, from Susa his Minoan palace high came to the sea, and over Hellespont, bridging his way, Europe with Asia joined, and scourged with many a stroke the indignant waves. Now they brought the work by wondrous arch pontifical, a ridge of pentant rock over the vast abyss, following the track of Satan to the selfsame place where he first lighted from his wing, and landed safe from out chaos to the outside bare of this round world. With pins of adamant and chains they made all fast, too fast they made and durable. Now in little space the confines met of empyrean heaven and of this world, and of the left-hand hell with long reach interposed. 3 several ways in sight to each of these 3 places led. Now their way on earth they had described, to paradise first tending, when behold Satan, in likeness of an angel bright, betwixt the centaur and the scorpion steering his zenith, while the sun in Aries rose, disguised he came. But those his children dear their parents soon discerned, though in disguise. He, after Eve seduced, unminded, slunk into the wood fast by, and changing shape to observe the sequel, saw his guileful act by Eve, though all unweeting, seconded by her husband, saw their shame which sought vain covertures. But when he saw descend the Son of God to judge them, terrified he fled, not hoping to escape, but shunned the present, fearing guilty what his wrath might suddenly inflict. That past returned by night, and listening where the hapless pair sat in their sad discourse and various plaint, thence gathered his own doom, which understood not instant, but of future time. With joy and tidings fraught, to hell he now returned, and at the brink of chaos, near the foot of this new wondrous pontifice, unhoped met who to meet him came, his offspring dear. Great joy was at their meeting, and at sight of that stupendous bridge his joy increased. Long he admiring stood, till Sin, his fair enchanting daughter, thus the silence broke. Parent, these are thy magnificent deeds, thy trophies which thou viewest as not thine own, thou their author and prime architect. For I no sooner in my heart divined, my heart which by a secret harmony still moves with thine, joined in complex connection sweet, that thou on earth hast prospered, which thy looks now also evidence. But straight I felt, though distant from the world, thee worlds between, yet felt that I must after thee with this thy son. Such fatal consequence unites us three. Hell can no longer hold us in her bonds, nor this unvoyageable gulf obscure detain from following thy illustrious track. Thou hast achieved our liberty, confined within hell gates till now. Thou us empowered to fortify thus far, and overlay with this portentous bridge the dark abyss. Thine now is all this world. Thy virtue hath won what thy hands builded not. Thy wisdom gained what odds, what war hath lost, and fully avenged our foil in heaven. Here thou shalt monarch reign, there didst not. There let him still victor sway. This battle hath adjudged, from this new world retiring, by his own doom alienated, and henceforth monarchy with thee divide of all things, parted by the imperial bounds, his quadrature from thy orbicular world, or try thee now more dangerous to his throne. Whom thus the Prince of Darkness answered glad, fair daughter, and thou son and grandchild both, high proof ye have given to be the race of Satan, for I glory in the name, antagonist of heaven's almighty King, amply have merited of me, of all the infernal empire, that so near heaven's door, triumphal with triumphal act have met, mine with this glorious work, and made one realm, hell and this world, one realm, one continent, of easy thoroughfare. Therefore, while I descend through darkness, on your road with ease to my associate powers, them to acquaint with these successes, and with them rejoice, you too this way, among these numerous orbs all yours, right down to paradise descend. There dwell and reign in bliss, thence on the earth dominion exercise, and in the air chiefly on man, sole lord of all declared, him first make all your thrall, and lastly kill. My substitutes I send ye, and create plenipotent on earth, of matchless might issuing from me. On your joint vigor now, my hold of this new kingdom all depends, through sin to death exposed by my exploit. If your joint power prevail, the affairs of hell no detriment need fear. Go and be strong. So saying, he dismissed them. They with speed their course through thickest constellations held, spreading their bane. The blasted stars looked wan, and planet struck, real eclipse then suffered. The other way Satan went down the causey to hell gate. On either side disparted chaos overbuilt exclaimed, and with rebounding surge the bars assailed, that scorned his indignation. Through the gate wide open and unguarded Satan passed, and all found desolate, for those appointed to sit there had left their charge, flown to the upper world. The rest were all far to the inland retired, about the walls of Pandemonium, city and proud seat of Lucifer, so by allusion called, of that bright star to Satan Paragon. There kept their watch the legions, while the grand in council sat, solicitous what chance might intercept their emperor's scent. So he, departing, gave command, and they'd observed. As when the Tartar from his Russian foe, the Astrakhan, over the snowy plains retires, or Bactrian Sophi from the horns of Turkish crescent, leaves all waste beyond the realm of Aladul, in his retreat of Taurus or Caspian. So these, the late heaven-banished host, left desert, utmost hell, many a dark league, reduced in careful watch round their metropolis, now expecting each hour their great adventure from the search of foreign worlds. He through their midst unmarked, in show plebeian angel, militant, of lowest order, passed. And from the door of that Plutonian hall, invisible, ascended his high throne, which under state of richest texture spread, at the upper end was placed in regal luster. Down a while he sat, and round about him saw unseen. At last, as from a cloud, his fulgent head and shaped star bright appeared, or brighter, clad with what permissive glory since his fall was left him, or false glitter. All amazed at that so sudden blaze, the Stygian throng bent their aspect, in whom they wished beheld their mighty chief returned. Loud was the acclaim. Forth rushed in haste the great consulting peers, raised from their dark divan, which with like joy congratulant approached him, who with hands silenced, and with these words attention won. Thrones, dominations, princedoms, virtues, powers, for in possessions such, not only of right I call ye and declare ye now, returned successful beyond hope, to lead ye forth triumphant out of this infernal pit, abominable, accursed house of woe and dungeon of our tyrant, now possess as lords a spacious world, to our native heaven little inferior, by my adventure hard, with great peril great achieved. Long were to tell what I have done, what suffered, with what pain I voyaged the unreal, vast, unbounded deep of horrible confusion, over which way by sin and death a broad way now is paved to expedite your glorious march. But I toiled on my uncouth passage, forced to ride the untractable abyss, plunged in the womb of unoriginal night and chaos wild. The jealous of their secrets fiercely opposed my journey strange, with clamorous uproar protesting fate supreme. Thence how I found the new created world, whose fame in heaven long had foretold, a fabric wonderful of absolute perfection, therein man placed in paradise by our exile made happy. Him by fraud I have seduced from his creator, and the more to increase your wonder, with an apple. He thereat offended, worth your laughter, hath given up both his beloved man and all his world to sin and death a prey, and so to us, without our hazard, labor, or alarm, to range in and to dwell, and over man to rule, as over all he should have ruled. True is, me also he hath judged, or rather me not, but the brute serpent in whose shape man hath deceived, that which to me belongs in enmity, which he will put between me and mankind, I am to bruise his heel. His seed, when is not set, shall bruise my head. A world who would not purchase with a bruise, or much more grievous pain? Ye have the account of my performance. What remains, ye gods, but up and enter now into full bliss. So having said, a while he stood, expecting the universal shout and high applause to fill his ear, when contrary ears from all sides, from innumerable tongues, a dismal universal hiss, the sound of public scorn. He wondered, but not long had leisure, wondering at himself now more. His visage drawn, he felt to sharpen spare. His arms clung to his ribs, his legs entwining each other, till supplanted down he fell, a monstrous serpent on his belly prone, reluctant but in vain. A greater power now ruled him, punished in the shape he sinned, according to his doom. He would have spoke, but hiss for hiss returned with forked tongue to forked tongue, for now we're all transformed alike to serpents, all as accessories to his bold riot. Dreadful was the din of hissing through the hall, now swarming, now thick with complicated monsters, head and tail, scorpion and asp, and amphisbian dire, Serestus horned, hydrus and elops drear, and dispus, not the thick swarmed once the soil bedropped with blood of Gorgon or the isle of Ophiosa, but now greatest he the midst, now dragon grown, larger than whom the sun engendered in the Pythian vale on slime, huge Python. In his power no less he seemed above the rest still to retain. They all, him following, issued forth to the open field, where all yet left of that revolted rout, heaven fallen, in station stood or just array, sublime with expectation, when to see in triumph issuing forth their glorious chief. They saw but other sight instead, a crowd of ugly serpents. Horror on them fell in horrid sympathy. For what they saw, they felt themselves now changing. Down their arms, down fell both spear and shield. Down they as fast, in the dire hiss renewed, in the dire form catched by contagion, like in punishment as in their crime. Thus was the applause they meant, turned to exploding hiss, triumph to shame cast on themselves from their own mouths. There stood a grove hard by, sprung up from their charge, his will who reigns above, to aggravate their penance, laden with fair fruit, like that which grew in paradise, the bait of Eve used by the tempter. On that prospect strange their earnest eyes they fixed, imagining for one forbidden tree a multitude now risen, to work them further woe or shame, yet parched with scalding thirst and hunger fierce, though to delude them sent, could not abstain, but on they rolled in heaps, and up the trees climbing sat thicker than the snaky locks that curled Megara. Greedily they plucked the fruitage fair to sight, like that which grew near the bituminous lake where Sodom flamed, this more delusive, not the touch but taste deceived. They fondly thinking to allay their appetite with gust, instead of fruit chewed bitter ashes, which the offended taste with spattering noise rejected. Oft they essayed, hunger and thirst constraining, drugged as oft, with hatefullest disrelish, writhed their jaws with soot and cinders filled. So oft they fell into the same illusion, not as man whom they triumphed once lapsed. Thus they were plagued and worn with famine long, and ceaseless hiss, till their lost shape permitted they resumed, yearly enjoined, some say, to undergo their annual humbling certain numbered days, to dash their pride and joy for man seduced. However, some tradition they dispersed among the heathen of their purchase got, and fabled how the serpent, whom they called Ophion with Eurynome, the wide encroaching Eve, perhaps, had first the rule of high Olympus, thence by Saturn driven, and Ops, ere yet Dictaean Jove was born. Meanwhile in paradise the hellish pair too soon arrived, sin there in power before, once actual, now in body, and to dwell habitual habitant. Behind her death came following pace for pace, not mounted yet on his pale horse, to whom sin thus began. Second of Satan sprung, all-conquering death, what think'st thou of our empire now, though earned with travail difficult, not better far than still at hell dark's threshold to have sat watch, unnamed, undreaded, and thyself half-starved? Whom thus the sin-bred monster answered soon. To me, who with all eternal famine pine, alike as hell or paradise or heaven, there best when most with ravin I may meet, which here, though plenteous, all too little seems to stuff this maw, this vast unhidebound corpse. To whom the ancestress mother thus replied, Thou therefore on these herbs and fruits and flowers feed first, and on each beets next, and fish and fowl, no homely morsels, and whatever thing the scythe of time mows down, devour unspared, till I in man, residing through the race, his thoughts, his looks, words, actions all infect, and season him thy last and sweetest prey. Thus said, they both betook them several ways, both to destroy or unimmortal make all kinds, and for destruction to mature sooner or later, which the Almighty sing from his transcendent seat the saints among, to those bright orders uttered thus his voice. See with what heat these dogs of hell advance to waste and havoc yonder world, which I so fair and good created, and had still kept in that state, had not the folly of man led in those wasteful furies, who impute folly to me. So doth the prince of hell and his adherents, that with so much ease I suffer them to enter and possess a place so heavenly, and conniving seem to gratify my scornful enemies, that laugh as if transported with some fit of passion. I to them had quitted all, at random yielded up to their misrule. And know not that I called and drew them thither my hellhounds, to lick up the draught and filth which man's polluting sin with taint hath shed on what is pure, till crammed and gorged, nigh burst with sucked and glotted offal, at one sling of my victorious arm, well-pleasing sun, both sin and death, and yawning grave at last through chaos hurled, obstruct the mouth of hell forever, and seal up his ravenous jaws. Then heaven and earth renewed shall be made pure to sanctity, that shall receive no stain. Till then the curse pronounced on both proceeds. He ended, and the heavenly audience loud sung hallelujah, and at the sound of seas, through multitude that sung, Just are thy ways, righteous are thy decrees on all thy works, who can extenuate thee? Next to the Son, destined restorer of mankind, by whom new heaven and earth shall to the ages rise, or down from heaven descend. Such was their song, while the Creator, calling forth by name his mighty angels, gave them several charge, that sorted best with present things. The world had first his precept so to move, so shine, as might affect the earth with cold and heat scarce tolerable, and from the north to call decrepit winter, from the south to bring celestial summer's heat. To the blank moon her office they prescribed, to the other five their planetary motions and aspects in sextile, square, and trine, and opposite of noxious efficacy, and when to join and sit on unbenign, and taught the fix of their influence malignant when to shower, which of them rising with the sun or falling should prove tempestuous. To the winds they set their corners, when with bluster to confound sea, air, and shore, the thunder when to roll with terror through the dark aerial hall. Some say he bid his angels turn askance the poles of earth twice 10 degrees and more from the sun's axle. They with labor pushed a bleak eccentric globe. Some say the sun was bid turn reins from the equinoctial road, like distant breadth to Taurus with the 7 Atlantic sisters, and the Spartan twins up to the tropic crab, thread thence down amain by Leo and the Virgin in the scales as deep as Capricorn, to bring in change of seasons to each clime. Else had the spring perpetual smiled on earth with verdant flowers, equal in days and nights, except to those beyond the polar circles, To them day had unbenighted shone, while the low sun to recompense his distance in their sight had rounded still the horizon, not known or east or west, which had forbid the snow from cold as still a land, and south as far beneath Magellan. At that tasted fruit, the sun from his Thean banquet turned its course intended. How else had the world inhabited, though sinless more than now, avoided pinching cold and scorching heat? These changes in the heaven, though slow, produced like change on sea and land, sidereal blast, vapor and mist and exhalation, hot, corrupt and pestilent. Now from the north of Norumbaga, and from the Samoan shore, bursting their brazen dungeon, armed with ice and snow and hail and stormy gust and flaw, Boreas and Cacius and Argetes, loud and Thracius, rend the woods and seas upturned. With adverse blast upturns them from the south, notice, an aether black with thunderous clouds from Sierra Leone. Thwart of these as fierce then rushed the Levant and the potent winds, Eurus and Zephyr with their lateral noise, Scirocco and Lebetio. Thus began outrage from lifeless things, but discourse first, daughter of sin, among the irrational, death introduced through fierce antipathy. Beast now with beast gan war, and fowl with fowl, and fish with fish. To graze the herb all leaving, devoured each other, nor stood much in awe of man, but fled him, or with countenance grim glared on him passing. These are from without the growing miseries which Adam saw already in part, though hid in gloomiest shade, to sorrow abandoned, their worst felt within, and in a troubled sea of passion tossed, thus to disburden sought with sad complaint. O miserable of happy, is this the end of the new glorious world, in me so late the glory of that glory, who now become accursed and blessed? Hide me from the face of God, whom to behold was then my height of happiness. Yet well, if here would end the misery, I deserved it, and would my own deservings, but this will not serve. All that I eat or drink or shall beget is propagated curse. O voice once heard delightfully, increase and multiply, now death to hear. For what can I increase or multiply but curses on my head? Who of all angels to succeed, but feeling that evil on him brought by me, will curse my head? Ill fare our ancestor impure, for this we may thank Adam, but his thanks shall be execration. So besides mine own that shall bide upon me, all from me shall with a fierce reflux on me redound. On me is on their natural center light heavy, though in their place. O fleeting joys of paradise, dear brought with lasting woes, did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me, nor here place in this delicious garden? As my will concurred not to my being, it were but right and equal to reduce me to my dust, desirous to resign and render back all I received, unable to perform thy terms too hard, by which I was to hold the good I sought not. To the loss of that sufficient penalty, why hast thou added the sense of endless woes? Inexplicable thy justice seems, yet to say truth, too late I thus contest. Then shouldst have been refused those terms whatever, when they were proposed. Thou didst accept them. Wilt thou enjoy the good, then cavil at the conditions? And though God made thee without thy leave, what if thy son proved disobedient, and reproved retort, wherefore didst thou beget me? I sought it not. Wouldst thou admit for his contempt of thee that proud excuse? Yet him not thy election, but natural necessity begot. God made thee of choice his own, and of his own to serve him. Thy reward was of his grace, thy punishment then justly as it is will. Be it so, for I submit, his doom is fair, that dust I am, and shall to dust return. O welcome hours whenever. Why delays his hand to execute what his decree fixed on this day? Why do I overlive? Why am I mocked with death and lengthened out to deathless pain? How gladly would I meet mortality, my sentence, and be earth insensible. How glad would lay me down as in my mother's lap. There I should rest and sleep secure. His dreadful voice no more would thunder in my ears. No fear of worse to me and to my offspring would torment me with cruel expectation. Yet one doubt pursues me still, lest all I cannot die, lest that pure breath of life, that spirit of man which God inspired, cannot together perish with this corporeal clod. Then in the grave or in some other dismal place, who knows how I shall die a living death? No thought horrid if true, yet why? It was but breath of life that sinned. What dies but what had life and sin? The body properly hath neither. All of me then must die. Let this appease the doubt, since human reach no further knows. But though the Lord of all be infinite, is this his wrath also? Be it, man is not so, but mortal doomed. How can he exercise wrath on end on man, whom death must end? Can he make deathless death? That were to make strange contradiction, which to God himself impossible is held, his argument of weakness, not of power. Will he draw out for anger's sake finite to infinite and punish man, to satisfy his rigor, satisfied never? That were to extend his sentence beyond us to nature's law, by which all causes else according still to the reception of their matter act, not the extent of their own sphere. But say that death be not one stroke, as I suppose, bereaving sense, but endless misery from this day onward, which I feel begun both in me and without me, and so last in perpetuity. Ay me, the fear comes thundering back with dreadful revolution on my defenseless head. Both death and I am found eternal, and incorporate both. Not I on my part single, in me all posterity stands cursed. Fair patrimony that I must leave ye, sons. Oh, were I able to waste it all myself and leave ye none. So disinherited, how would you bless me now your curse? Why should all mankind for one man's fault thus guiltless be condemned, if guiltless? But from me what can proceed, but all corrupt, both mind and will depraved, not to do only, but to will the same with me? How can they then acquitted stand in sight of God? Him after all disputes forced I absolve. All my evasions vain, and reasoning through all these mazes lead me still but to my own conviction. First and last on me only, is the source and spring of all corruption, all the blame lights due. So might the wrath, fond wish, couldst thou support the burden heavier than the earth to bear, than all the world much heavier, though divided with that bad woman. Thus what thou hast desired, and what thou fearest, alike destroys all hope of refuge, and concludes thee miserable beyond all past example and future, to Satan only like both crime and doom. O conscience, into what abyss of fears and horrors hast thou driven me, out of which I find no way, from deep to deeper plunged. Thus Adam to himself lamented loud through the still night, and now as ere man fell, wholesome and cool and mild, though with black air accompanied with damps and dreadful gloom, which to his evil conscience represented all things with double terror, on the ground outstretched he lay, on the cold ground, and oft cursed his creation, Death is oft accused of tardy execution, since denounced the day of his offense. Why comes not death, said he, with one trice acceptable stroke to end me? Shall truth fail to keep her word, to justice divine not hasten to be just? But death comes not to call. Justice divine mends not her slowest pace for prayers or cries. O woods, O fountains, hillocks, dales, and bowers, with other echo late I taught your shades to answer and resound far other song. Whom thus afflicted, when sad Eve beheld, desolate where she sat, approaching nigh, soft words to his fierce passion she essayed, but her with stern regard he thus repelled. Out of my sight, thou serpent, that name best befits thee with him leagued. Thyself is false like his, and color serpentine may show thy inward fraud, to warn all creatures from thee henceforth, lest that too heavenly form pretended to hellish falsehood snare them. But for thee I had persisted happy, had not thy pride and wandering vanity, when least was safe, rejected my forewarning, and disdained not to be trusted, longing to be seen, though by the devil himself, in overweening, but to overreach, but with the serpent meeting, fooled and beguiled, by him thou, I by thee, to trust thee from my side, imagined wise, constant, mature, proof against all assault, and understood not all was but a show rather than solid virtue, all but a rib, crooked by nature, bent as now appears, with more to the part sinister from me drawn, well if thrown out, as supernumerary to my just number found. Why did God, creator wise, that peopled the highest heaven with spirits masculine, create at last this novelty on earth, this fair defect of nature, and not fill the world at once with men as angels without feminine, or find some other way to generate mankind? This mischief had not then befallen, and more that shall befall, innumerable disturbances on earth through female snares, in straight conjunction with this sex. For either he never shall find out mate, but such as some misfortune brings him, or mistake, or whom he wishes most shall seldom gain through her perverseness, but shall see her gained by a far worse, or if she love withheld by parents, or his happiest choice too late shall meet, already linked and wedlock bound to a fell adversary, his hate or shame, which infinite calamity shall cause to human life, and household peace confound. He added not, and from her turned, but Eve, not so repulsed, with tears that ceased not flowing, and tresses all disordered, at his feet fell humble, and embracing them, besought his peace, and thus proceeded in her plaint. Forsake me not thus, Adam. Witness heaven what love sincere and reverence in my heart I bear thee, and unwitting have offended, unhappily deceived. Thy suppliant I beg, and clasp thy knees. Bereave me not, whereon I live, thy gentle looks, thy aid, thy counsel in this utmost distress, my only strength and stay. Forlorn of thee, where shall I betake me? Where subsist? While yet we live, scarce one short hour perhaps, let us two, between us two, let there be peace, both joining, as joined in injuries, one enmity against the foe by doom express assigned us, that cruel serpent. On me exercise not thy hatred for this misery befallen, on me already lost, me than thyself more miserable. Both have sinned, but thou against God only, I against God and thee, and to the place of judgment or return, there with my cries importune heaven, that all the sentence from thy head removed may light on me, sole cause to thee of all this woe, me only, this object of his ire. She ended weeping, in her lowly plight, immovable, till peace obtained from fault acknowledged and deplored, in Adam wrought commiseration. Soon his heart relented towards her, his life so latent sole delight, now at his feet submissive in distress, creature so fair, his reconcilement seeking, his counsel whom she had displeased, his aid. As one disarmed, his anger all he lost, and thus with peaceful words upraised her soon. Unwary and too desirous as before, so now of what thou knowest not, who desirest the punishment all on thyself. Alas, bear thine own first, ill able to sustain his full wrath, who thou feel'st is yet least part, my displeasure bear so ill. If prayers could alter high decrees, I to that place would speed before thee, and be louder heard, that on my head all might be visited, thy frailty and infirmer sex forgiven, to me committed and by me exposed. But rise, let us no more contend nor blame each other, blamed enough elsewhere, but strive in offices of love, how we may lighten each other's burden in our share of woe, since this day's death denounced, if aught I see, will prove no sudden, but a slow-paced evil, a long day's dying to augment our pain, and to our seed, O hapless seed, derived. To whom thus Eve, recovering heart, replied, Adam, by sad experiment I know how little weight my words with thee can find, found so erroneous, thence by just event found so unfortunate. Nevertheless, restored by thee, vile as I am, to place of new acceptance, hopeful to regain thy love, the sole contentment of my heart living and dying, from thee I will not hide what thoughts in my unquiet breast arisen, tending to some relief of our extremes, and, though sharp and sad, yet tolerable, as in our evils, and of easier choice. If care of our descent perplexes most, which must be borne to certain woe, devoured by death at last, and miserable it is to be of others' cause of misery, our own begotten, and of our loins to bring into this world a woeful race, that after wretched life must be at last food for so foul a monster. In thy power it lies, yet ere conception, to prevent the race unblessed, to be being yet unbegot. Childless thou art, childless remain, so death shall be deceived as glut, and with us too be forced to satisfy his ravenous maw. But if thou judge it hard and difficult, conversing, looking, loving, to abstain from love's due rites, nuptial embraces sweet, and with desire to languish without hope, before the present object languishing with like desire, which would be misery and torment less than none of what we dread, then both ourselves and seed at once to free from what we fear for both, let us make short, let us seek death, nor if he not found, supply with our own hands his office on ourselves. Why stand we longer shivering under fears that show no end but death, and have the power of many the ways to die the shortest choosing, destruction with destruction to destroy. She ended here. Her vehement despair broke off the rest. So much of death her thoughts had entertained as dyed her cheeks with pale. But Adam, with such counsel nothing swayed, to better hopes his more attentive mind laboring had raised, and thus to Eve replied, Eve, thy contempt of life and pleasure seems to argue in thee something more sublime and excellent than what thy mind contemns. But self-destruction, therefore sought, refutes that excellent thought in thee, and implies not thy contempt, but anguish and resent for loss of life and pleasure overloved. Nor if thou covet death, at utmost end of misery, so thinking to evade the penalty pronounced, doubt not but God hath wisely armed his vengeful ire, that so to be forestalled. Much more I fear lest death so snatched will not exempt us from the pain we are by doom to pay, Rather, such acts of contumacy will provoke the highest to make death in us live. Then let us seek some safer resolution, which methinks I have in mind, calling to mind with heed part of our sentence, that thy seed shall bruise the serpent's head. Piteous amends, unless by meant with my conjecture our grand foe Satan, who in the serpent hath contrived against us this deceit. To crush his head would be revenge indeed, which will be lost by death brought on ourselves, or childless days resolved, as thou proposed. So our foe shall scape his punishment ordained, and we instead shall double ours upon our heads. No more be mentioned than of violence against ourselves, or the willful barrenness that cuts off from hope and savors only rancor and pride, impatience and despite, and reluctance against God and his just yoke laid on our necks. Remember with what mild and gracious temper he both heard and judged without wrath or reviling. We expected immediate dissolution, which we thought was meant by death that day, when lo, to thee pains only in childbearing were foretold, and bringing forth soon recompense with joy fruit of thy womb. On me the curse's slope glanced on the ground. With labor I must earn my bread. What harm? Idleness had been worse. My labor will sustain me, and lest cold or heat should injure us, his timely care hath the sought provided, and his hands clothed us unworthy, pitying while he judged. How much more, if we pray him, will his ear be open and his heart to pity incline, and teach us further by what means to shun the inclement seasons, rain, ice, hail, and snow, which now the sky with various face begins to show us in this mountain, while the winds blow moist and keen, shattering the graceful locks of these fair-spreading trees, which bids us seek some better shroud, some better warmth to cherish our limbs benumbed. There this diurnal star leave cold the night. How we, these gathered beams reflected, may with matters here foment, and by collision of two bodies grind the air attrite with fire, as late the clouds justling are pushed with winds rude in their shock time the slanted lightning, whose thwart flame driven down kindles the gummy bark of fir or pine, and sends a comfortable heat from far, which might supply the sun. Such fire to use, and what else may be remedy or cure to evil which our own misdeeds have wrought? He will instruct us praying, and of grace beseeching him, so as we need not fear to pass commodiously this life, sustained by him with many comforts, till we end in dust, our final rest and native home. What better can we do than to the place repairing where he judged us prostrate fall before him reverent, and there confess humbly our faults and pardon beg, with tears watering the ground and with our sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in sign of sorrow unfeigned and humiliation meek. Undoubtedly he will relent and turn from his displeasure, in whose looks serene, when angry most he seemed and most severe, what else but favor, grace, and mercy shown? So spake our father penitent, nor Eve felt less remorse. They forthwith to the place repairing where he judged them prostrate fell before him reverent, and both confessed humbly their faults, and pardon begged with tears watering the grounds, and therewith their sighs the air frequenting, sent from hearts contrite, in sign of sorrow unfeigned, and humiliation meek. The end of the 10th book.